Hello, and welcome to today's Oncology Data Advisor interview. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Patrick Wen, who is the Director of the Center for Neuro-Oncology at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Professor of Neurology at Harvard Medical School. And today he's here to tell us about the recent FDA approval of Dordaviprone for glioma. Dr. Wen, thanks very much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. To start off, I'd like to introduce yourself and share a little about what you do.
So I run the Center for Neuro-Oncology at Dana-Farber, and we're focused on treating all types of brain tumors, but especially gliomas. And for the past 5 to 7 years, we've been working on this drug, Dordaviprone, for initially for glioblastomas, but then the focus turned to diffuse midline gliomas. The first patient we had a significant response to the drug. And when we sequenced the tumor, we found that it had the H3 K27M mutation. And then the focus turned towards these types of tumors.
Wonderful. Looking forward to hearing more about this research today. So to start off, I'd like to begin by introducing us to Dordaviprone and the clinical trials that led to its accelerated approval.
So just stepping back in terms of these diffuse midline gliomas, they're perhaps the hardest to treat of all types of gliomas. They're in the midline, so surgery is not possible. And they don't usually respond to the standard chemotherapy, such as temozolomide. So the only treatment that's effective is radiation. And that usually helps for less than a year before the tumors come back. And apart from trying radiation again, there's really no effective therapy and no drug has been approved. So dordaviprone works by two mechanisms. It's a dopamine receptor, a 2 and 3 inhibitor. And so by blocking that pathway, it can inhibit tumor growth. And it also stimulates something called ClpP that affects the mitochondrial metabolism. And that also stimulates the death of tumor cells. So the thought is that both mechanisms come into play in slowing down the growth of these tumors. So the study that was done was a study in tumors, diffuse midline gliomas that were measurable. So one of the major challenges in determining whether treatment is effective for these tumors is that many of the tumors are very difficult to measure. So the common diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma that's present in children and are devastating, they don't enhance, so it's not really measurable. And the same with spinal cord tumors. So the FDA suggested that we accumulate a data set of about 50 patients with measurable tumors. So it turns out that most of these were high up in the brainstem, usually in the thalamus. So these 50 measurable tumors allowed us to tell whether the drug produced a response or not. And in a subset of these patients, there were responses that were quite durable. And so that led to the approval of this drug. I think the other flip side of any approval is the risks and benefits. And one of the nice things about this drug is that unlike many targeted therapies, it's well tolerated. You take it once a week, it's a pill. And although some patients can be tired or have mild nausea or headaches, most patients actually don't feel like they're on medicines that affect their quality of life.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for giving us the background about this disease and the results of this trial. So how do these results, what do they mean for the future of glioma treatment?
I think that this drug still only helps a small subset of these patients. And so we definitely need to develop additional therapies. I think one of the first steps is that this was an accelerated approval for this drug in recurrent tumors. And so there's an ongoing phase 3 trial looking at the same drug in newly diagnosed H3 K27M mutated gliomas. And so that trial is being done outside the US, and hopefully that will confirm the benefit and lead to full approval of this drug. But now that this drug is available, I think there are a number of potentials. One is that because it's so well tolerated, you can imagine combining it with other agents and develop more innovative therapies. I think It's also important in a different way, in that this is an area where no drug has been approved before, and the population is small. And so many companies are not really interested in developing their drugs for this population, even though it's so desperately needed for the patients that are affected. And now that there's an approval, it shows that there's a path to getting regulatory approval for these drugs. And hopefully this will incentivize more companies to be interested in these agents, in developing these agents for these tumors.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to hear, and looking forward to hearing results of future trials as well. So do you have any advice for clinicians as they begin to use this agent for their patients?
So the study on which this approval was based was primarily in tumors that were higher up in the brainstem, mainly thalamic gliomas. So that's where the data is strongest. It has been evaluated in diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma also. These are tumors lower down in the brainstem that are harder to measure. But I don't know the up-to-date data, and so that's something that the company would be able to provide more detail on.
To know. All right. Awesome. So as we conclude today, do you have any other thoughts or parting messages about this approval or the future of the glioma treatment that you'd like our audience to know?
I think this is an important step forwards for our patients, even though it doesn't help every patient. It does allow some patients to have a benefit from a drug that doesn't have a lot of side effects. And hopefully our field can build on this and develop better treatments for our patients.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Wen, for coming on today to tell us about this approval. It's always wonderful to hear these encouraging results, and great to know that it's now approved for patients. So thank you again for coming on to share.
Thanks so much for having me.